So, what about the national debt? We have started an adult conversation that will dominate the debate until the elected leadership here in Washington does something real. So claimed Erskine Bowles, co-chairman, along with former Senator Alan Simpson, of President Barack Obama's Commission on Federal Deficits and Debt last week. The feeling that Americans and their representatives in Congress were ready for serious adult work on reducing deficits and debt lasted about 3 days, from last Friday's final fiscal commission meeting to Monday's announcement by Obama of a $900 billion accord with congressional Republicans to extend tax cuts and embark on a round of new spending. Something's not right here. I thought that the Republicans were elected to do something about the national debt, to start reducing it, not add to it. I'm deeply disappointed that we have this short-term deal and it's not linked to long-term fiscal restraint, the co-chairman said. On Thursday morning, after he and Simpson met at the White House with Budget Director Jack Lew and Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner, they issued a statement calling on President Obama to launch negotiations with congressional leaders from both parties on the critical next step of establishing a serious fiscal responsibility plan and to unveil his own deficit-cutting proposals in the State of the Union address, building on the ones in last week's Bowles-Simpson report. The long-term debt problem. The long-term budget prospects remain as stark as they were before President Obama announced his deal with the GOP leaders. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the 10-year budget forecast is for continued budget shortfalls, extraordinarily high national debt compared to previous decades, and higher interest payments to service that debt, to the point that CBO predicts that by 2016, interest payments will be larger than military spending. So, when debt service exceeds military spending, says a Harvard historian, it has historically been the tipping point where a great empire or nation ceases being great. Why did the feeling that America was ready for serious debt reduction evaporate so quickly? One reason may be that members of Congress don't believe that the United States could suffer a sovereign debt crisis as Greece and Ireland are undergoing. I think it's true that a number of people just don't buy it, because we are different than Greece and Ireland, said the president of the Bipartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. They can't believe that the debt problems could actually come here. I think a number of other people think, maybe I do buy it, but it isn't worth the sacrifice of actually changing things. But I think most people don't quite buy it. And the worrying thing is that people who buy it the most are the financial people, the people who are managing the money. The tax and spending deal that President Obama announced Monday night did seem surreal, coming as it did on the heels of the Bowles-Simpson plan. It stops the momentum that we should have started last week. Someday we are going to have a major liquidity crisis. We are also going to have a major interest rate crisis. Nobody knows when it comes. Economic historians and members of the President's Fiscal Commission do believe a sovereign debt crisis is feasible, or at least that the United States will suffer many years of anemic growth and high unemployment. High debt to GDP levels, gross debt above 90% of gross domestic product, are associated with notably lower growth outcomes. University of Maryland economist Carmen Reinhart told the Senate Budget Committee earlier this year. Federal government debt is approaching that level. Using a different measure, total debt for all levels of government, U.S. gross debt is at 93% of GDP, according to the International Monetary Fund. Compare that with Greece at 130% of GDP and Ireland at 99% of GDP. Making the analogy between hostile bond markets and a wolf, Reinhardt also warned that we never know when the wolf will be down at our door. The wolf is very fickle, and markets can turn very quickly, and a high debt level makes us very vulnerable to shifts in sentiments that we cannot predict. Also, people must remember that there is a spiritual side to war or warfare also. Could it be that the wars, like the Afghanistan-Iraq war, are affecting the economy also? That is a very real possibility, and it is true. So, in a debt crisis, in order to persuade bond buyers to keep buying Treasury bonds, Congress would be forced to cut spending and raise taxes. The commission member who put that scenario most clearly was a non-politician, Honeywell Chief Executive David Coate. These difficult political decisions will get made one of two ways. The first is we can do it thoughtfully and proactively. The second is we can wait for the bond market to force it upon us. And that will be decidedly harder, more abrupt, and unpleasant. We can ask Greece and Ireland what that's like, and soon Italy, Spain, and Portugal. He added, but Americans ought to wonder, what happens when the bank, in this case foreign countries like China, doesn't want to loan you any more money? Of course, the alternative to raising revenues through borrowing is raising them through higher taxes. But one reason Obama is not likely to get Republicans to agree to that is their memories of Republican presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush agreeing to tax increases in 1982 and 1990. Or so they say. If I believed that the increased revenue would actually be used for deficit reduction, I might reluctantly come to the table in a global agreement, said panel member Representative Jeb Hensarling, Republican Texas, last week, before voting against the Debt Commission's recommendations. Hensarling said when he recalls Reagan's agreement to raise taxes in 1982 and Bush's reversal in taxes in 1990, it just seems to me that somehow the spending restraint never quite materializes, and yet the increased revenues do, and it seems like the increased revenues simply chase the spending. It's Obama in the Oval Office now, not Bush or Reagan, but it is a familiar tug-of-war between Republicans and Democrats over cutting taxes versus cutting spending. In other words, there is a day of reckoning, and it's coming very soon. President Obama's statement at Tuesday's press conference implied that in some areas federal spending may not be big enough. What are we doing to revamp our schools to make sure our kids can compete? He asked. What are we doing in terms of research and development to make sure that innovation is still taking place here in the United States of America? What are we doing about our infrastructure so that we have the best airports and the best roads and the best bridges? He sounded confident that he will win the debate with Republicans, forcing them to agree to tax increases, because they'll find out once they start running the House of Representatives that spending cuts would be, as he said Tuesday, very painful. Putting on his hat as campaign strategist, Obama said, either they rethink their position, I don't think they're going to do very well in 2012. He also said, the fact of the matter is, the American people already agree with me. And again, there's something much bigger going on here. All things that must change quickly or rapidly, and for the better. Because it's about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations. Revelation chapter 11, verse 18. and the nations were angry, and their wrath is come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that thou should give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and should destroy them which destroy the earth. 19. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings, and voices, and thunderings, and an earthquake, and great hail. Yes, it is time for all prophecy to be fulfilled, and these are the end times, transition days, which is a continuing day-by-day process, and there are many signs happening all around the world. There is also a spiritual side to everything.